Now let's go on to some pretty decent, badass effing news. We're switching over to foreign policy. In France, a couple of days ago, I was telling you that it seemed like the right wing was rising up and was going to take over in France. Apparently, that did not happen. However, it appears Macron didn't get a big win either. There has been a left alliance that formed in France. These are different left groups. There's a communist group that's a part of it, like the Communist Party. I believe like some type of social democrat or whatever is part of it or whatever. Anyway, these groups are to the left of Macron's party. And obviously to the left of the right party, but to the left of Macron's party. And they were able to win an extraordinary amount of seats. I believe last time I checked, it was 180, which no one predicted and no one expected. Let's go ahead and get into this story here and what that could mean for the West.
We are hearing from the office of the French President Emmanuel Macron, who says he's studying the results of the legislative elections and will await the final structuring of the new National Assembly before taking any necessary decisions. We should have that tomorrow morning. His office says the president will ensure that the sovereign choice of the French people is respected. The results are nothing less than shocking, a complete turnaround, an apparent rebuke of the far right in favour of the far left. The New Popular Front, a left-wing coalition, is now projected to win more votes than any other bloc in the second round of parliamentary elections. President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance projected to finish second, followed by the far-right National Rally Party.
Pause here. So does everybody see what just happened? NPF, that's what they're calling it, the New Popular Front. They received between 178 to 205 seats. And Ensemble, this is Macron's party, which has received 157 to 174 seats. And of course, the National Rally Party, which is the right-wing party, received the estimate of 113 to 148 seats. Long story short, the Left Alliance, NPR, they received the most number of seats, which means, you know how this goes in Europe, is a little bit different. That means that technically President Macron needs to be gone. Now, because they received the most amount of seats they won in this particular election, but they still don't have the majority. This is where it gets kind of weird. They still don't have the majority. That means that there's kind of like a deadlock for who is going to assume that position. So President Macron is not resigning yet. He's just kind of just waiting in the wings because NPR doesn't have enough people to have a majority, but neither does Ensemble and neither does National Rally. But what this shows you folks is that when people keep saying left policies can't win, France just proved you wrong about this. What they did to win was that they collaborated with other left groups. So instead of having all these different parties, all these people came together and said, look, we're going to fight for these particular left issues and we're going to win this damn thing. And here we are. Let's continue.
Shocking because of what happened in the first round of elections last weekend, when it was a completely different picture. The far-right party got the most votes, followed by the left-wing bloc. Macron slumped to third. It's important to note Mr. Macron will remain president. He said he'll serve out the remainder of his term, which expires in 2027. Let's head to our team in the field. Melissa Bell is at the election event here in Paris with the far-right party. Let's first go to Jim Bitterman outside the office of the Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, another young Prime Minister. We were expecting to have another one announced, weren't we? Because the leader of the right is only 28 years old. But it does seem as though Macron is slightly strengthened. The far left is very strengthened. So who is going to take the Prime Minister's office if this plays out as we expect?
That is a really good question, Max. The fact is that no one knows at this turning. We're assuming we're going to hear from the Prime Minister, current Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, 34 years old, by the way. in the next few minutes here. And we're assuming that he's going to say he's going to stay in this office, as you might like if you were here. I mean, this is a pretty nice place to operate out of. Having said that, there's going to be challenges to that. The far left is going to say, well, wait a second, we had the most seats in the parliament, even though we don't have an absolute majority. They had to have 289 seats in order to have the absolute majority. They're far from that. The far right was far from it, and so was Macron's centrist. So it's a kind of thing that's where the parliament's divided. The prime minister can be named by the president, but that doesn't mean he can stay in power very long, because there'll be challenges coming from the parliament that basically have a challenge to his authority at the first turning. Every time as soon as he tries to do something, there will be a challenge to that in the parliament. So, and there also could be challenges in the streets. That's one of the things we kind of are hearing rumors about already, that there might be some demonstrations against the guy that's sitting here, Gabriel Attal, if he tries to stay in power, when in fact others had more votes this evening and got more seats in the parliament. Max?
Now, I'll go ahead and say this, and I'm going to keep it real and give credit where credit is due. The French people know how to get things done. What do I mean by that? They don't just sit around talking about what we can't do, what we can't do. They actually go out and do it. Last year, when I was covering the protests that were happening in France, the French people were like, forget this, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you dare come along and increase our retirement age. And he increased it by 2 years. And the French people said, oh, hell to the no. Hell to the no. And they were protesting left and right. They were setting France on fire. I was like, holy snap, fam. And we were following this like for weeks. They were protesting in the streets. So when it came time to vote, look at what the people did. They put their activism with their vote. What I see oftentimes happen in the United States is we've had people protest in mass numbers, like the George Floyd protest, the pro-Palestine protest. But when it comes time to vote, which both of these happened during election years, when it comes time to vote, people most of the time just go along with what they were already doing before because they're afraid of the other side, or they stay at home. Even the coalition right now to abandon Biden, in Michigan, the uncommitted campaign, even that coalition right now, I'm like, shouldn't those people be funneled into supporting one of the pro-Palestinian candidates instead of just saying, I'm not committed to supporting Joe Biden? And this is where I think we fall short here in the United States. When we have massive movements in this country, which just tend to happen during election seasons, we don't transfer that into the votes, which we should be doing. So France, the French people did this. They had enough of Macron. They were tired of his ish. And so they protested a number of times against his policies and against his decisions. But when it came time to show up and vote, they made sure they supported the left alliance. Now, don't get me wrong. It took different groups coming together that agree on certain left positions for that to happen. We have so many different groups here in the United States, all these different groups. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, they do great work. The Green Party does great work. All these different groups do great work. But I just don't understand why we keep creating all these damn parties. And I said this before. Why doesn't everybody just come together for one big alliance, one big coalition to actually get some things done? And then I asked this question. Do people in the US really want to get things done? The French did. Now, I want you to see this clip here. This is from Midwestern Marks. Left-wing coalition defeats the far right in French elections. And again, this is a worker coalition that came together. Listen.
So the French elections took place this weekend, and guess what? I actually have some good news to report. Everybody expected the far right-wing National Rally Party led by Marine Le Pen to dominate the elections. However, a brand new leftist coalition that was spearheaded by Jean-Luc Mélenchon actually won the most votes. It was a coalition that was formed with the explicit goal of defeating the right-wing extremists, and it was successful. And this wasn't just a center-left coalition. It took place between many hard-left groups. involving Mélenchon's party, the French Green Party, the French Socialist Party, and the French Communist Party. And they're proving that real left-wing pro-working class politics is the only way to defeat right-wing populists. These right-wing parties that are gaining popularity as neoliberalism decays in Europe. It was under the neoliberal centrist leadership of Emmanuel Macron that the National Rally Party was able to gain such popularity. Macron and the centrists got second in the recent elections, by the way. So I think that there's a lot we can learn from this as Americans and as leftists going forward. We need unity of pro-working class and anti-imperialist forces in this country if we're going to defeat the far right. And by that, I don't mean allying with the Democratic Party and centrist neoliberals like Macron. I mean a coalition of real left-wing pro-working class forces who want to make regular working people's lives better. That is how we win.
And he is correct. So this alliance that happened in France, these are the pro-worker people. All these groups, they said, let's just come together for the workers, especially after Macron increased that retirement age. So, that got under people's skin. But the reality is they get things done. And I've said this before. Yes, everybody in France has health care. So if they get hurt by the police, they know that they have health protection. They can go to the doctor. That's going to be taken care of. There's that bit. The other bit is they do have other benefits that a lot of people don't have. Some people don't have paid leave in this country. Some people don't have paid vacation. If you were like me and you waited tables, you probably didn't have paid vacation. So there's all these things that go into it. However, when you look at all the different parties that we have in this country, I said, this don't make no sense. And I said it before too, even if you look at 2024 election, why are all these people running separately? You got Jill Stein, you got Dr. West, you got Claudia de la Cruz. All three of them pretty much agree on the issues. But it's like you're splitting I don't get it. Right? So we need to build and have some type of coalition in this country. Now, here's what that does not mean. Let's break this down. That doesn't mean you just join up with any Tom, Dick, and Harry that says, yeah, the system sucks. Because not everyone who says the system sucks has your best interest in hand or in mind as a worker. Okay. Some people say the system sucks, but they don't want you to have a living wage. So let's check that. Check that right at the door. But they get things done because they're able to put, and you said it, I'm going to bring it back up here. LPA Film said it. They're able to put the ego aside. There's too many egos. This country is wild with ego. I've never met so many people before in my life that I want to have the credit for this. Credit me. It's me. It's my thing. It's my this. It's my brand. It's my that. There's no community. There's no unity. There's no goddamn solidarity in this country. There isn't. How many of you know your next door neighbor? How many of you just go and knock on your neighbor's door and you can just sit down and talk? Do you even see their face? There's no community. When you don't have community, it's hard to have a foundation. So this I attitude is never going to get us anywhere as a group, as any type of worker power. That is never going to work. And we've learned this over and over again, but yet we continue to do it. So they were able to do that. All these different groups in this country, and people can't put ego aside, just little things. I don't want to be seen in the room with that person. You wouldn't believe some of the things that I hear. For those of us that do independent media, you wouldn't believe some of the things that I've heard, even in activist spaces. I don't want to be seen with that person. That's why shit don't get done. And honestly, I feel like some of the people that say that are the ones that are trying to prevent something from getting done. But they go out the streets. The French people said, no, this ain't the first time. Don't forget the yellow vest in France. They rose up. The people pushed back. They said, hell no, we're all in this together. We all care about our rights here. We all care about protecting the workers. But it's very clear to me in this country, not everyone cares about that. Very clear to me. Now, NFP, he gave a little speech here. I want you to hear something that he said. French politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who is sweeping to a shock victory in the French election, has called for the recognition of a state of Palestine. France must recognize the Palestinian state now. The balance of power must show that the world condemns this genocide. It's in French, but I read it for you.
Faire preuve, comme nous l'avons fait dans cette élection, de détermination, de volonté politique, de discipline de combat. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut que, loin de rentrer chez vous et de vous dire seulement ouf, mais vous avez bien sûr le droit de vous dire ouf, il faut vous mobiliser. Nous allons avoir un Premier ministre ou une Première ministre du nouveau Front populaire. Tout à l'heure, Mathilde, la présidente du groupe Insoumis, Manuel et moi, on bavardait de comment on s'y prend. Écoutez, elle vous a dit la liste de tout ce qu'on peut décider par décret, vous l'avez entendu. Sur le plan national et sur le plan international, ça sera sans doute un peu plus, comment dirais-je, disputé. Mais c'est normal, puisque la Constitution donne au président de la République des prérogatives, mais elle les donne aussi au Premier ministre. Donc il va falloir que les deux s'entendent pour, par exemple, reconnaître le plus vite possible l'État de Palestine, puisque c'est un des rares moyens dont nous disposons de peser. Mais
all the people that came out, that was another part too. Again, like this made international news. And of course, as I said, Macron is not willing to step down. Listen to this.
French President Emmanuel Macron has refused to accept the resignation of his Prime Minister after a left-wing coalition won the country's parliamentary election. Dominic Waghorn reports from Paris.
It was accepted amongst most people that the far-right party, the National Rally, would not repeat the success it made in the first round of the elections and would not achieve the outright majority it so desperately wanted. But I think almost everybody expected it to still be the biggest party in the parliament. It was outmanoeuvred by a blocking manoeuvre by pretty much all its rivals across the political spectrum in France, the Republican Front as it's called, and that it's repeated what it's done in the past, which is kind of running against the National Rally and kind of neutralising its threat. But I don't think anybody expected the left-wing coalition to lead and Macron's Ensemble party to come second. So now the dust is settling, Sophie. I think people are now trying to work out how big a gamble it was, how big a failure it was by Macron, or did it actually vindicate what he did, taking this extraordinary gamble to call these unnecessary snap elections in the wake of the far-right's success in the European elections. There are those who are saying that actually it's not so big a crisis. They're saying that de Gaulle's Fifth Republic constitution is designed to kind of absorb these crises. It was based on the premise that the French are a fractious lot. They are so riven with squabbling, they need a very strong president. And the president has extraordinary powers. Conceivably, Emmanuel Macron could continue until he leaves office in 2027, ruling by decree and using some kind of place person as prime minister, pretty much as he has done since he lost his parliamentary majority, his party's majority, in 2022. So they would say plus ça change, but I think the majority of analysts are saying no, it was a big mistake. It was a gamble that has backfired, and what it's going to lead to is a huge amount of chaos and gridlock and a very difficult situation here politically. And I think the big concern amongst those critics of Macron is that because this gamble has backfired, and if he does try and rule by edict, those extremists, the far right and also the extremists on the left, are going to be even more strengthened, because their supporters will say, look what happens when you vote for your party. It's the outcome is stitched up by the rest of the establishment. They will be furious over the next 2.5 years watching a president using presidential edict, a man they call Jupiter ruling on high, overriding and not listening to the will of the people as expressed through these elections. And therefore, when we come around to presidential elections in 2027, the far right could be even stronger. So we'll have to wait and see what happens then. I think what we are guaranteed to see now in French politics for weeks, months, possibly years to come, is political turmoil as the French president and his parliament kind of now grapple with what is effectively uncharted territory.
French president.
So again, Macron is not ready to resign. He's refusing to do so. But again, as he mentioned, they can move things in a different direction, especially now that the NPF party, now that they have the number of seats that they do. I mean, things can move in a way that they can get him to step down. So we'll have to see. We'll have to watch this very closely because, like I said, they don't have the majority. They won the most seats, but they don't have the majority. So it's essentially stalled. But the point that you need to take from that story is that different groups on the left came together and built an alliance and they won.